Love it, I love it, and live it up, don't let nobody bring.
Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're gonna be discussing the glutes, and I'm going to talk about how often you should or how often you're able to train your glutes. I know that when I first started my fitness journey, I thought it was a great idea to train legs basically every single day. Common question from a lot of my female clients is how often should they train their glutes if they are trying to specifically grow them, build them, or just tone them up. A lot of the information that I'm going to be talking about in this video is coming from a few articles and blog posts from the glute guy. If you haven't heard from him, his name is Bret Contreras, and he is basically the glute master. So, how often should you be training, or can you train your glutes? You can train your glutes about 2 to 6 times a week. However, there are of course many factors that you need to take into consideration so that you have enough time to recover for your next session. You really need to focus on volume. So volume refers to how much work is being done based on how many reps and sets you do in that particular session. So let's say, for an example, you do 10 sets of specific glute exercises. So you can either do all of these 10 sets in one session, or you can break it up. Let's say, for an example, train glutes 2 times a week and break up these 10 sets. So you do 5 sets on your first day that you train your glutes, and then you break it up and do another 5 sets on the second day that you train your glutes. It has been said that when you choose to distribute, for an example, those 10 sets through multiple workouts throughout the week, you're going to allow more muscle to grow versus doing those 10 sets in just one workout. This is because there's a maximum amount of growth stimulus that a muscle can basically handle in one session. So if you're working out, let's say for like 2 hours in one session, it almost becomes counterproductive. So if it's more optimal to be training a muscle group more frequently, aka more times throughout the week, how often exactly should you be training your glutes? This is going to be based on the SRA curve. SRA stands for stimulus, recovery, and adaptation. When you work out, a stimulus occurs and you basically break down the muscle, and your muscle actually decreases in size. After we've broken down the muscle, it's our body's job to repair this broken muscle. And this basically happens when we allow our bodies to recover, because we don't want this breakdown of muscle to happen again. In order to prevent this, our bodies need to build muscle that is larger than it was before. And this is known as adaptation. AKA, you need to train more intensely or train harder before it can break down again. One thing to keep in mind is the intensity of your training. If you stress out your body too much or work out too intensely, you might not be able to enter this recovery or adaptation phase as well. So this goes back to doing all of those 10 sets in one workout. If you do that, you might stress out your body too much, and this may actually hinder muscle growth. Muscle protein synthesis includes recovery, which is like the rebuilding part, and also adaptation, building bigger muscles. Through this SRA, the stimulus, recovery, adaptation curve, muscle protein synthesis is constantly high. When this curve gets back to normal levels, we know that our body has recovered and adapted, and this is when we're going to be able to train again as the SRA curve gets back to normal levels. Training too often actually causes a decrease in muscle size because you're not allowing it enough time in the recovery and adaptation phase. However, not training frequently enough is not going to allow you to create this peak in the SRA curve for a new point of muscle growth. It's ideal to train that muscle group, for an example, your glutes, once your muscle has recovered and fully adapted. It takes a minimum of 3 to 4 days or 72 to 96 hours in order for this SRA curve to be completed. So if you were to wait, let's say 5 or 6 days in order to train your glutes again, this is not exactly going to be optimal because you can actually train your glutes sooner for faster muscle growth. So how long exactly you need to wait in order to train your glutes again really depends on 2 things. The first one being your training age, aka your experience with training your glutes. And number 2 would be the type of exercises that you're doing. On your glute days, there are hundreds of different exercises that you can choose from. However, some exercises have a longer SRA curve. So let's say, for an example, on Monday, you do 3 sets of hip thrusts. And then on Tuesday, you do 3 sets of body weight kickbacks. There is definitely going to be a difference in the recovery and adaptation phases between those 2 days. So there are a few things to take into consideration. When your muscle recovers and adapts to a stimulus, it is going to grow. In order for your body to hit this stimulus, you need to highly activate it. Highly activating a muscle means more muscle tension is needed. Number 2 is range of motion. So the greater the range of motion means that more work is being done. Using a greater range of motion means more muscle breakdown, aka more recovery is needed. Think about squats and deadlifts or lunges. These all require a large range of motion. If you consider, let's say, glute kickbacks, this is more of a smaller range of motion, so you know right off the bat that by doing squats and lunges, you're going to be creating more muscle damage, aka you're going to need more recovery time, versus if you're going to do, let's say, those glute kickbacks, smaller range of motion, you're going to need less time to recover. Number 3 is you want to focus on the lowering aspect of the exercises. This is also known as the eccentric portion. So let's say you're doing a lunge, you want to focus on the lowering part, as this is what's going to cause you to be sore. Let's compare a squat to a hip thrust. So when you're squatting down, you need to control the weight the entire time that you're doing the exercise. The lower you go down into your squat, the more emphasis is placed on your glutes. And this is why the lowering portion of the squat, aka the eccentric portion of the squat, is the hardest part. In a hip thrust, the hardest part is actually once you come up towards the top and you're squeezing your glutes at the top. So realistically, in a hip thrust, there isn't much emphasis on the eccentric portion. So if you're comparing squats to hip thrusts, the squats are going to basically need more recovery time than if you were doing the hip thrusts. Using a band to perform some glute exercises is great because it provides constant tension on your glutes. However, the recovery part for the exercises that you're using a band typically only lasts about 1 to 2 days. So realistically, you can do quite a bit of exercises, glute exercises in particular, using the band quite often. However, if this is all that you do, just use band work when you're working your glutes, there's not really any overload happening, and no overload means no stimulus, meaning there's not really an increase in muscle protein synthesis. So like I mentioned, doing squats and lunges typically take longer to recover, but it doesn't exactly have to be this way. So instead of squatting heavy, try using a band wrapped around your legs to create constant tension on your glutes. And maybe only come up 2/3 of the way. Remember, a greater range of motion is going to leave you sore for longer, so you're going to need more recovery. If you want to train your glutes more frequently, try using a band, doing squats, only coming up about 2/3 of the weight. Use a light weight or just use the band and perform more reps. Also, since you're only coming up about 2/3 of the way, your range of motion is going to be decreased, and there's going to be less emphasis on the eccentric part that typically leaves you pretty sore. All right, so what program exactly should I follow? Well, there's a few options. So option number one, let's say you are only able to work out in your home. You don't have a gym membership, or maybe you're even on vacation and you don't have a lot of equipment with you. If you really want to train your glutes every single day, you can use a band and do band work every single day. Option number two would be to switch it up between high and low frequency. If you want to train your glutes 6 times a week, then go for it. Try to do lighter weights using a lower or less range of motion, and do lots of band work. If you want to train your glutes 3 times a week, then choose exercises that is going to create a lot more of the eccentric portion of the exercise, such as squats and lunges with a full range of motion that's going to keep you sore for quite some time. You can train your glutes 3 times a week, heavy, for about 4 weeks, and then you can always switch it up and train your glutes maybe for 6 times a week for the following 4 weeks, and just do, like I said, lighter weight, more reps, and just lots of band work. So although I gave you quite a few tips today, you have to remember that every single one of us is different. Some people respond best to low frequency of training in the glutes, and some people respond best to high frequency training. Some people, when performing a deadlift, will feel the exercise more in their hamstrings, and some people in the deadlift will feel it more in their glutes. Honestly, everyone's glutes fire differently depending on the exercise. Now, walking lunges are typically one of the hardest exercises because of the large amount of eccentric loading, but some people just don't get sore when performing walking lunges. So this just goes to show you that every single one of us are completely different, and you need to really just play around with what I've talked about today and see what works best for you and your body. So I hope you guys found this video extremely helpful, and if you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And last but not least, make sure you guys are following me on my Instagram, where I post tons of workout videos and lots of valuable information, including nutritional tips to get you closer towards your fitness goals.